large walker device with a tractor tire inner tube around it. And then in the middle is where the customer stands with a table-like surface around them so that they get served. And at the same time, the distance between themselves and the outer part of the tube looks like about 3.5 feet. So when the two tubes come together, it creates the 6 feet rule. Now, this is kind of
that doesn't sound cumbersome or unwieldy.
Well, I think it also limits the amount of people that can be out here. Now, it is an outdoor kind of a restaurant. It's like a fish and ale restaurant. However, it's actually got quite a good buzz, and a lot of other restaurants who've seen this are now connecting with them to find out like where they had ordered these or how could they have these made for their restaurant. And the funniest thing I think about all this is there is no seating apparatus. So you have to stand through your whole meal and drink. And of course it's on wheels, so you could just kind of walk around while you're there. But
Red Lobster should just clear the middle of the lobster tanks.
Right?
You just stand in the middle. You're willing to cross these
The worst
lobsters.
part is that they have a dress code. That's the part that miffs me, that you have to wear a tie while you're standing in your inner tube. And
Right.
I think that's just ridiculous.
It's true. The I don't know if you've got another one, Maddie, but I had to bring up another one really, really quick. And this was from Nassau County in New York. Now, they had announced today that tennis courts are open. And for our listeners, I put a clip up on our website or on our Facebook page where the spokesperson for the city who is talking about the tennis courts saying, now there are strict rules in play. You cannot pick up someone else's balls. Yeah, you can't touch them at all. You can kick their balls, but you can't touch their balls. And the moment she says it, this realization on her face, and then she's like, okay, I'm going to blush. But then she continues to go through her speech, which just progressively gets worse and worse. Which truly led you to believe that maybe she should have proofread this speech before she got out there, or the danger of talking about a sport with a lot of balls. So
That's great.
And it gets to a point where the security officers on either side of her are actually laughing so hard they start walking off camera. But
it's true that often some of the best bloopers aren't misreading things, it's miswording things.
Exactly.
Because I know years ago there was a commercial and the announcer said, "Kids, tell your parents to get you a genuine Davy Crockett bunk bed with scenes of Davy in action on the mattress."
That's awesome.
Same kind of thing. It's nothing technically wrong, but it didn't come out the way you meant it to.
Yeah. Phrasing. Well, it's really funny. So I encourage our listeners to go over to our Facebook page and check that out. It's really funny. So let's turn things over to you, Steve. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Last I checked, I haven't been swabbed today, but for all intents and purposes, or all intensive purposes, as Claude Pates say, like people who mispronounce methamphetamine and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you got to watch your
I appear to be fine. That's the short answer to your question.
How would they do a swab with social distancing? Like a really long Q-tip they just shove through the mail slot? They just tell you to bend over.
It's the haircuts where you have to social distance that puzzle me. How they have 6-foot-long scissors and, I don't know, straight-edge razors from 6 feet apart.
Yeah,
that doesn't sound dangerous.
Yeah, I've been super lucky that my wife has just been cutting my hair, so and it's turned out quite. I've actually decided that I don't know if I need to go to the hairdresser anymore. I have to just get my wife to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really good. It was a very surprising, task that she pulled off quite well. So I've been really happy. And it's great when you're on a podcast or radio. Nobody's going to follow up and check with you. So.
Right, you could be naked or at an IKEA.
It's true.
What is this could be? I'm naked right now.
Matt's always naked. In fact, it's one of those things that I got to keep forcing him to put clothes on. So we went through, of course, a little bit of your bio, as I mentioned earlier, but one thing that I kept out, and intentionally, was the amount of work you did with Groucho Marx.
It's true. The rumors are true. I am old enough to have known and worked for Groucho Marx because I was 19 when I got the job, and I worked for him in his home the last 3 years of his life as his personal secretary and archivist, handling all of the memorabilia he'd accumulated in all those years in show business.
That is absolutely fantastic. Now, there is of course, our listeners a wonderful range of ages. So myself, of course, I do remember Groucho Marx and the Marx Brothers, and I grew up with a lot of them. And the thing that, of course, I had to mention to Matty G, since he's a little bit of a different generation than I am. When there was some hesitation on Groucho Marx, I had to bring up the Halloween costumes with the glasses and the nose and the mustache built in, and instantly he knew.
Yeah, so, they call them Groucho glasses.
The Groucho glasses, exactly.
Fake nose and glasses, and with or without a rubber cigar, if you want to add that
exactly
to it. Well, it's interesting about the different generations because, of course, when I was growing up, the Marx Brothers weren't current. I mean, their films came out in the 30s and 40s, and I grew up in the 60s and 70s. But you found them on local television shows, television channels in the early morning hours, or at revival houses. And now it's strange because of technology, you can just point and click and watch a Marx Brothers movie if you want to. But there are so many things to choose from that it isn't realistic to think that Gen X and millennials are going to seek out these old black and white films, even though they might really enjoy it. So it never surprises me when someone can't place the name, or just they've never seen a Marx Brothers movie or an episode of You Bet Your Life, the quiz show Groucho had in the 50s. Because it's a double-edged thing. They're infinitely more accessible now than when I was growing up, but there's also so much more to sample. It gets lost in the shuffle.
It's true. And it's what I find the most interesting thing was that how through the generations a tidbit has always floated along with Groucho Marx, and if not the Groucho glasses, or if not the films, through other comedians who drew a lot of their inspiration from Groucho.
Well, many comedians have credited him with being an inspiration to them. And he was broke ground in a lot of ways, like turning to the audience and saying something in a movie. That was very groundbreaking in the 1920s, that he would just stop and turn to the camera and talk to the audience. Now we take it for granted, and there's whole TV shows where you regularly see one of the characters talking to us.
Yes.
But at the time, and the producers at the time were wary of it, because they said, you can't just talk to the people in the audience because you're on, they said the same thing with their first film, The Coconuts, in 1929. The producers insisted that the orchestra had to be in the film when the love song is sung, because otherwise people are going to wonder where the music's coming from.
Oh boy.
And the writers said, that's ridiculous. The boy says, there's something I have to tell you. And the woman says, what's that? And then you hear the music and he sings it. And they said, no, we can't do that because people are going to, and they had to dress up the orchestra in costumes and have them in the shot so that you wouldn't have to wonder, because people just, it was the early days of sound film, and they just weren't sure how it was going to go over. So you had, but yes, Groucho was a big influence for many generations, and
I feel like they
so
weren't
the
giving
legacy
people credit.
What'd you say?
I feel like they didn't give their viewers credit. It's like they were saying, no, people are too stupid. They can't figure this out.
Yeah. Also, Groucho with his grease paint mustache.
Yes.
They said, well, that's fine for the stage, but you can't wear a grease paint mustache in a movie because people won't accept it. And of course, he just sort of overruled them and wore a grease paint mustache and was wildly successful in the 30s and 40s with his fake mustache till he grew a real one in the 50s for his TV show. Mm-hmm. But they just didn't know, it's like when you hear about the great train robbery silent film in 1903 that ends with the cowboy aiming the pistol at the camera and firing, and there really were people who ducked because they'd never seen anything like that, and it was an instinct or a reflex then. So,
wow, that's amazing.
But that was one of the things I appreciated about getting to know Groucho was, in addition to the fact that he was this guy that I saw in Duck Soup and Horse Feathers and A Night at the Opera and all that, he was a man from 1890 whose first-hand memories went from before the Wright brothers' flight to after the moon landing. He was this living link to such a huge chunk of history. Plus, he personally knew so many people that just seem like they didn't exist in color and three dimensions, like George Gershwin and W.C. Fields and James Thurber and Dorothy Parker and all these people that, he knew them as friends of his. Mm-hmm. And they knew him. They were lucky enough to have known him. So it was just an extraordinary thing for me, also because I don't know if you've had the experience of meeting someone when you're younger and then older, you think, I wish I'd been able to appreciate who they were, but I just wasn't quite sure, and it's frustrating. In my case, I was just an obsessive Marx Brothers and Groucho fan, as were all of my friends in high school, because the Marx Brothers were experiencing kind of a renaissance of popularity because they were so anti-establishment and thumbed their noses at authority that's something that really appealed to the baby boomers and the protesters and the don't trust anyone over 30 crowd. So it was, a remarkable thing to actually meet this guy, and I was able to fully drink in the experience because I knew so much about him before our paths ever crossed.
Yeah. I do have to ask you, considering you were such a fan, how did you land this gig of working for Groucho?
There was a Marx Brothers movie made in 1930 for Paramount called Animal Crackers, in which Groucho played Captain Spaulding. That's also where he did the joke, one morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So one of those quoted Grouchoisms.
Yep.
And when the Paramount films were sold to Universal in the 50s, Animal Crackers had fallen through the cracks on copyright renewal. So they didn't have the right to re-release it without clearing the rights with the writers and composers of the original Broadway version of it. And they didn't see any point in spending any money on that because they were much more focused on classics like Airport 75, for instance, and didn't see any. But all of my friends were fanatics and thought, how can you not think it's worth bringing out this lost Marx Brothers film? So I started a committee and a petition drive at UCLA where I was a student. It was the committee to re-release Animal Crackers. And I got in touch with Erin Fleming, the Canadian actress who had started out as Groucho's secretary and had become his manager and really was in control of his life in those last years. And she brought Groucho to UCLA, and we were surrounded by news cameras and reporters and scruffy students. I said, Groucho, I'm very happy to be meeting you after all this time. And he said, well, you should be. And she said, this is Steve. He's trying to get Animal Crackers re-released. And Groucho said, "Did you get it?" And I said, "Not yet, but I'm working on it." And he said, "You better or I'll fire you."